This episode contains content that may be distressing to some listeners, including discussions of mental health and suicide. Tell Me More podcast is being recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures. Welcome to Tell Me More, where we have conversations about the good, the bad and the real. I'm your host, Olivia Molly Rogers. On today's episode, I had the absolute pleasure of chatting to Ben West all the way from London. Ben is an amazing mental health advocate, and he became passionate about this when he lost his brother to suicide. Sam was only 15 years old when he took his life, and Ben was 17. And the work he is doing in this space is just incredible. I have been a fan of his for years, so I'm so excited to have him on the podcast today. And I think all of you listening will gain so much from him. He is warm, honest, eloquent, funny, and a joy to listen to. We'll be right back after this quick ad break. Can we talk about the runner's high for a second? I used to think it was a myth, but it is very real and I have missed it. I'm finally getting back into some very slow runs post-marathon, and I tried the Lululemon Fast and Free running collection, and honestly, I felt unstoppable. It's so lightweight, nothing rides up, nothing distracts. Your body moves freely and your mind actually gets a break. If you're like me and you need the mental reset just as much as the workout, highly recommend. This set is a 10 out of 10. Lululemon Fast and Free. Feels like nothing, runs like nothing else. Learn more at lululemon.com.au. Now back to the show. Ben West, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm really good. I was just saying it's been a long week. This job is, the work I do is very, very meaningful, but it is... you bounce from very, very heavy, serious topic to very, very heavy, serious topic. And you're sort of trying to keep up with all these really, really serious issues all week. So yeah, I'm quite tired and I'm looking forward to the weekend. But it's really good to be here talking to you. And I know we've tried to get this in the diary for ages. So it's really good to be here.
I know you woke up early for me, so thank you so much. I'm very grateful.
That's okay.
I would love for you to start by telling me how you would describe yourself and probably the work that you do.
So my plan when I was growing up was to join the armed forces and go into the army and fly helicopters. So that was what I was completely set on doing. Was joining the Army Air Corps and learning to fly. And so I applied to university. I was going to uni to do aerospace engineering and sort of go down that route. And then in September 2017, my younger brother Sam was diagnosed with clinical depression. I didn't know what clinical depression was. No one had ever explained what depression was to me. So I just thought, okay, Sam's a bit unhappy. I didn't quite understand how you could be diagnosed with unhappy. And we never really spoke about it. And then, very sadly, in January 2018, Sam took his own life and died. And he was 15 years old. And very, very quickly, you realised that when I was told that Sam had been diagnosed with depression, what I was really being told was that Sam had been diagnosed with this very, very serious illness that in 3 months' time was going to kill him. And I remember just reflecting and going, how on earth did I not know that that was as serious as, the seriousness of what was going on? And I very quickly started talking to my friends and I started talking to my teachers because I was still in school. I was only 17 when this happened, and realised that a lot of people weren't aware, and a lot of people were also struggling with their own thing. I mean, friends of mine told me that they'd attempted suicide and never told anyone. And I just remember thinking, well, something's got to change. Like, something has got to change here. This is not okay. I remember it's almost the sort of doors were opened and it was all the secrets were out. And I just went, this is bad. And I felt like I really had an opportunity to create that change within my school. Started talking about it in school, and then very quickly you learn about sort of more national things that need to change, policy level, government level things that need to change. And it seemed like a no-brainer that I was going to go and change those things. Still didn't expect this to become a job and a career. And then it's just the snowball started rolling, and it's just collected momentum, and now it's what I do full time. It's what I'll do for the rest of my life. It's something that means an enormous amount to me, and yeah, so I'm a full-time mental health campaigner, which is which is not always an easy job, but it is very, very rewarding to know that there are Sams out there that are 12, 13, 14, who hopefully when they reach 15, the support and the education and the access to treatment and the interventions and the prevention will all be there to stop what happened to Sam from happening to those people. And that's really what drives me, is that what happened to Sam was so avoidable. It was so avoidable. When you look through his history and you look through his medical notes and you look through what happened and the steps that went wrong, they were all avoidable. It was just a domino effect of things that shouldn't have gone wrong, going wrong. And that's obviously incredibly frustrating, but it's also really promising, because if shouldn't have gone wrong, then they should be really easy to fix to make sure they don't go wrong for other people. And so that's become my full-time job, is just working out how do we fix those things that went wrong for Sam.
It's incredible. I've loved following you. I think I found your page maybe 5 or so years ago, and I just remember being so impressed by such a young person doing such big, important work and really actually making a difference. It's been incredible to watch, and you should be really proud. And I also want to say just how sorry I am for your loss. And Sam, from what the stories that you tell in your book, he seemed like a beautiful young man. I would love for you to tell me about what he was like as your brother.
Oh, yay. I like when this happens, because so much of my job is spent talking about Sam's death, and it's obviously important, but it's, sometimes he shouldn't be defined by how he
Yeah.
died. And he was just so brilliant. I mean, it's a real shame that he didn't survive longer than 15, because I would have loved to have had more stories of him as an adult and what he got up to. He was incredibly talented. I mean, that's the first thing to say, is that, he was just creatively just unbelievably talented. If he picked up a canvas and some paints, he would go and create this incredible painting. He did loads of these paintings that you wouldn't look out of place in a pretty professional high-end gallery. Like some very, very interesting artwork that way. He started producing his own music. So he's created film scores digitally on his own. He's 14 at the time he's doing all this. He did stop motion animation, which later a person that works for Disney said was just very, very impressive for someone his age. And I'm like, this is obviously amazing, but it's like, if only that you would have worked out, you would have had such an interesting career. He was also very funny. Even when he had depression, actually, there were moments where he would make everyone laugh. His humor was always right on the limit as well. And we all know someone like that you don't know whether to laugh, and you really don't want to be around them in a public place just in case they say something. So he was like that, and he loved people. He struggled with people and fitting in, and knowing who to fit in with and how to fit in, and 15, we all remember it. It's a bit of a strange place to be in school at 15. But he had good friends that cared a lot about him. He, to all extents and purposes, had a lot going for him. He was very smart, very creative, very funny, had good friends. And so I guess from my point of view, it's then connecting that with what happened, suicide, clinical depression. The two don't seem to
Makes sense. Yeah.
connect. Which is obviously, quite telling in itself about who gets depression and who takes their own lives. It's not maybe who we think it is. And it certainly wasn't going to be Sam, because he was sort of, for most of his life, the opposite of someone that would take their own life in a stereotypical way. But yeah, he was very funny. It's taken me a long time to get to a point where you can just sort of sit here and go, It was so much fun. We had a great time because it was me, Sam, and we had another brother, Tom, or have another brother, Tom. All three boys, 2 years in between all of us. And growing up, it was just like living with your mates. That was
Yeah, it
great.
sounded like you
Great
had
times.
a really good childhood and, parents who were together. And yeah, I think it's an important note that mental health doesn't discriminate, and you could have all things going for you and not have some of the, key risk factors. And it doesn't mean that you're immune to becoming depressed. What did it look like? Like, what were the changes that you may not have noticed at the time as being depression, but you did say that your brother was different and you don't feel like it was the brother that you knew who died?
Yeah, it's really difficult, this question, because 15-year-olds tend to not be happy, chatty to their family, and it's a pretty difficult time in everyone's life. I think. I don't think many people live through the age of 15 and go, "Wow, that was that was great." You've got your brain's rewiring. You've got a whole load of hormones being dumped on you because of puberty. It's a pretty significantly difficult time. You're trying to fit in. You don't know who you are. You're trying to work that out. It's naturally, most 15-year-olds go through stages of mood swings and struggling to fit in and not necessarily having the same interests they used to. So it's very difficult to not look retrospectively and go, oh, of course he was unwell, because actually you realize that a lot of 15-year-olds maybe display some of those symptoms. The real kicker and the real the sort of word that describes when it goes from normal teenage behavior to something more serious is persistent. So when we describe mental ill health, when it passes the threshold of low mood and sort of enters the realm of depression, it's because it's persistent. And so for Sam, it wasn't that he was feeling lonely, maybe struggling with his identity and who he was, not really talking, engaging at dinner time, really sort of withdrawing from life, spending a lot of time in his room on his own, doing art that became very, very dark. Lots of reds and blues and some really dark paintings. But the key word there is persistent. It was like that for weeks and weeks and weeks and months. And that's when it becomes that sort of clinical level depression, which obviously for him makes it, and for anyone with depression, that's the bit that is the hardest. Like, everyone experiences low mood, and sometimes we all have really bad things happen, but that persistency of something going on and not changing for weeks or months can make you feel like that's how you're going to feel forever. And that's a scary thought. And I know Sam really struggled with this thought of going, this is it. This is life. And I don't blame him for reacting and going, I don't
Yeah.
want this. It must be horrible to sort of think that you're going to be like that for the rest of your life. That's where treatment and professional support comes in, and will go, no, this is not how it's going to be for the rest of your life. Because lots and lots of people get depression, get put through treatment, and never experience symptoms of depression ever again in their entire life. Lots of people experience serious mental illness. Not that depression is not serious, but in terms of medical categorization, a serious mental illness, like bipolar disorder, that doesn't ever get cured, but with the right approach and the right treatment will live a very, very happy life. We'll have children, we'll have a job, we'll get married, have a very fulfilling, happy life. So what needed to happen was for someone to go, this is what you're really saying, is that you don't believe this is ever going to change. And that must be really daunting. But you're right, it's that persistency. And that's what I say to people now. It's low mood is so normal. We all feel like that sometimes. But if it doesn't go away, and it maybe doesn't have a necessarily a reason, that's worth investigating. It's that persistency that's the worrying sign of all
Yeah.
of this.
I think also it's a common experience for children or teenagers to be told that, live it up, school's the best, like they're the best years of your life. And I remember struggling as a teenager and thinking, well, shit, like if this is as good as it gets, like life must be pretty grim after school. So I think it is, it's unsurprising that these teenagers struggle so much if they're having a really hard time. And then they think, well, everyone's telling me this is meant to be good. And it's not. It's really hard. But yeah, I think it's it's interesting as you were talking about your brother and, withdrawing from family dinners and things like that. Like I'm thinking about my brother as a teenager. I would be lucky to get a full word out of him. Like I'd be like, morning, Oscar. He'd be like, Like I could get grunts. But I do think that's like quite a normal teenage boy thing to not really engage with your family. But you spoke about the fact that at school he seemed to still be more of himself and his friends got that like happy side of him.
Yeah, so I mean, he was still from accounts. I mean, obviously, I wasn't in his class. Would have loved to have been, but I wasn't. He, from all of his accounts from his friends, he was still joking around, having a good time in lessons, and that's what his teacher said as well. Like, so what he was doing was doing a lot of masking at school, aware, just wanted to fit in. Most of us would, right? If you're having a bad day and you're around your friends, you're just going to pop that to the side and just try and have a good time. And I think people think of it as like the easy option. That takes a lot of energy. Anyone that's gone through something and tried to sort of get on with it and hide it, you'll know that, it's a bit like having a balloon inside your head. And the only way to suppress it is by literally pushing it and making it small. Like, it requires energy to suppress. So you end up being very, very tired. It's a big part of why people burn out in them, and people sort of feel like I'm so tired after this week. I wonder why. It's probably because you're dealing with some really big stuff and you're not actually expressing it. You're putting all that energy into suppressing it. So I think what he was doing was masking at school, suppressing what was going on, trying to fit in, and then coming home and just being exhausted and feeling able to then go, I'm not going to engage in this at all, and just take myself to my room and not necessarily feel upset, but just feel nothing and allow himself to feel nothing. So I think that's what happened, was he was trying so hard to fit in at school and be himself at school that he just had nothing left to give when he got home, which is not sustainable. And then when you're dealing with all of that, you also have feelings of anxiety. So then sleep becomes difficult, and depression also causes sleep to become difficult. And it's this really horrible, cruel cycle of your symptoms are worse because you're tired. You can't sleep because of your symptoms. You don't wake up, or you wake up, you do wake up, but when you wake up, you're tired. Symptoms are worse. You spend a day suppressing, you're tired, you can't sleep. And it's just this awful, awful cycle you can get caught in. I know Sam wasn't sleeping very well. So it all just sort of, you can start, when you talk about it like I'm doing now, you can really start to imagine this perfect storm sort of forming, where you go, wow, that was really not a good situation to be in. And especially when your brain is not thinking rationally, you can see how those sorts of thoughts about suicide being the only option start to enter the sort of mindset, and at first, from what I've spoken to people about, it will enter as a thought. That's an option, which actually is so normal. Like, most of us have thought that at some point, right? It's actually a huge number of people have suicidal thoughts at some point in their life, in terms of, I could do that as an option. Doesn't mean anything, but that's how it starts. And then it's the more you sort of think about that, the more you get what's called cognitive constriction. So it's like your brain just forms this tunnel around that one point. And then it's very, very difficult for you to imagine anything other than that. And that's exactly what happened with Sam. It's just over time that one thought, that one option became the only option. And he experienced in neuroscience what they call cognitive constriction. And yeah, that's that. And without treatment, I mean, he was getting treatment, but it was of very, very poor quality. That's what his brain said was the only option. And you can see how someone gets to that point.
Yeah. I feel like it's so clear talking to you now how much knowledge you have when it comes to mental health, depression. But you have said that when your brother was diagnosed, you were like, okay, like I think you said at the beginning that you said, oh, that he's been diagnosed with being sad. What did it mean to you at the time? And when your mum told you that he'd been diagnosed, what did that look like for you?
It meant nothing. I mean, if I was to make up a word now and just say, oh, my brother Tom has been diagnosed with, I don't know, it's very difficult to make up a word. That's essentially
like
what
he's got warts or something.
happened.
Like it's
It
not a
was
big
someone
deal.
came in and said,
Yeah.
yeah, and diagnosed with upset, and you're like, okay, like, and I guess there's as a male thing. I don't know whether it's a male thing at all, or I'm only speaking at it. I was one of three boys.
You were
so,
young too.
I was young, so there was this sense of like, why am I being told this? I don't understand why I'd need to know. What can I do about it? And also you sort of think anyone diagnosis is a medical fix. So we're sort of primed to go, it's not for me to fix that. Like, how on earth can I fix it? Like, if Sam had been diagnosed with cancer, maybe I would have maybe slightly understood a little bit more why I need to be, to see how he's doing. But I wouldn't have thought, oh, I'm really important in actually him, accessing treatment and how his recovery. So I just didn't really think about what I could have done. And that I felt a huge amount of guilt for a long, long time. And I don't anymore, but I did. It completely swallowed me, this guilt of going, why didn't I just say something? Because we know when it comes to treatment of depression, anxiety, and this is something I'm really passionate about, don't have enough time to campaign on or talk about very much, but something I'd love to see more of. Good mental health treatment will include the family. And we've seen recent years, we've seen, particularly around eating disorders, some really, really positive movement in terms of treatment where families are brought into the treatment room, and they're very much included in the treatment. And it creates, just brilliant, brilliant results. So I know now that it would have been so important for me to have just sat down with him and made him, and just sort of taken that tension out of the air. It would have been just so powerful for someone to have done that. But I didn't know. And I've carried that guilt for a long time, knowing that could have made a difference. But I didn't know. And then the other nice big scoop of guilt I got was because that evening, Sam was always just so difficult at the table. Like, I think I don't know, he was just a sort of vacuum of emotion when he sat at the kitchen table for dinner. And I was 17, I just found it really annoying. And we had an argument that night, and then sort of shouted at him as he left the room. And that was the last thing I said, was this, like, just shouting after him. And so I remembered that about 3 weeks later, and I was just like, oh my God, that's why he did it. I did that. Oh, wow, that was a horrible, horrible, horrible thing to realise. And we had police around, and I just genuinely, at one point, I just thought, well, I can't tell anyone because surely that's illegal. Surely what I've done is manslaughter. I don't want to go to prison. That's the last thing my family needs. So I literally, I was sat there going, how am I going to keep this a secret? As if I was trying to, get away with the crime, which was just the most, it's so nice that I can talk about it now, knowing that I don't feel any of that guilt anymore. And I've gone through my own, the treatment and therapy, and I've really tried to reframe that guilt and go, it wasn't for me to have solved that issue. Sam had professionals that he was on their books of. He had people that were responsible for his care that should have realised that he was at higher risk. It wasn't for a 17-year-old boy to solve this big,
God,
big
that would have
problem.
been so intense for you going through that type of guilt.
Yeah, I know. I remembered so clearly as well, going, look, Googling like sentences for manslaughter, and there's all these cases where there's like cases of people that have been, done for manslaughter and assisted suicide, and I was like, oh my God, I can't. And you've got when someone does die from suicide, because it's an I don't know whether it is, but it's an unexplained death or a sudden death. It's all investigated in case there's anything that's gone on. So it's basically, I mean, in the police's view, it's basically treated as a murder until it's not, right? So you've got all of the sort of forensic services there. You've got investigators coming. You've got police coming and going for quite a long time, doing statements and looking at the scene and taking photos of the scene. So it's very intrusive, particularly because it's a family home. You're just suddenly like opening up to services, and I just remember like, oh my God. And so you're doing police statements and you're trying not to
Oh
give
my
yourself
God.
away. And it was just this weird. I was 17. I was trying to negotiate, like work out how I was going to say things in police statements that aren't going to drop myself in it. So yeah, it was a horrible, horrible experience, and so misplaced. And I feel so sorry for 17-year-old Ben having to like feel like that, because I just know it wasn't his fault. I was never taught about it, and I think that's such an injustice that I wasn't given that opportunity to help Sam because someone just hadn't bothered to put this in the curriculum and told me at school or educated us better. I think that was something I'm so passionate about now, is going, if I had known, if Tom had known, if my mum had known more, if my dad had known more, we could have made such a difference. But no one gave us that opportunity because we were never taught that. And it still strikes me as weird that that's not part of the curriculum in a more meaningful way. Even now, it's not really there. I mean, they say it's in the curriculum, but I work in schools and I can tell you that it's a bit hit and miss. It doesn't always happen as they say it
I think
happens.
the empathy that you have for people that are going through it now as a result of what you experienced, like knowing that intense guilt, I can only imagine how invaluable your conversations are to the young people that you connect with. That second chapter of your book, I struggled to get through, as I imagine you struggled to write it. It was heavy stuff, but so important. You were very honest about what happened when your brother died and what you went through, and you gave him CPR, and it was very emotional, but I think so incredibly brave of you to be so honest about that, because it shows how real it all is. And this is happening to so many families. I think that there's 9 Australians are dying every day to suicide. I know people close to me have lost people to suicide. It is this really insidious thing, but I just feel like so many people lack the knowledge, like you said you did and your family did. We don't know what to do. We know that it's there, but we don't really know how to have the conversations we need to have. And I also think that, I mean, we lost someone, a beautiful Australian quite recently to suicide, and I saw commentary online that said how selfish it was. And I feel like that happens a lot. And I know that you actually felt that way initially when it came to your brother. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, chapter 2. Oh, yeah, that felt so important because you, we will never solve this issue if people don't realize how bad it is. And it's one of those subjects which is kept it's so awful that we just don't want to engage with it, and we don't want to talk about the actually what happens. And I just remember thinking, if people knew just what happens when that happens to a family and what goes on in I think you'd agree, quite a high level of detail is what I went into, then we understand why it's important to stop. Because it's not just someone losing their life, it is someone losing their life in a way that is so horrifically traumatic, for me, for my family, for the emergency services. I had a police officer message me on LinkedIn years later saying I had to leave the police because every time we went around that area, he had basically had PTSD from that night. A police officer, he wasn't even involved in the medical aspect of the care. It's that level of trauma. It's a horrible, 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 horrible thing to go through. So I felt really important to tell that story as honestly as I could, so people got a glimpse of just why I'm so desperate for something to be changed around suicide prevention. And it's really, really important that we understand the facts of what goes on, and we talk about that honestly, and we talk about suicide in a way that's honest, because it's, yeah, like you say, I mean, it's happening far, far too much. And I put a, there's some statistics that say, I think it's about 120 people are affected by each suicide, sometimes more. I mean, in the case of, more famous people and celebrities, when they die, huge numbers of people are affected, and it's just really, it's really unfair that we have this system now that those people are being so badly let down. Not all of them sort of interact with care and services, but we're just so far behind. And especially when you look at cancer and you look at how far we've come in treating cancer. It's over the last 100 years. It's incredible. I mean, most cancers 100 years ago would have been a death sentence, right? And now, actually, you can get a huge number of different cancers and have quite a good survival rate. With suicide, the rates of suicide have basically stayed the same since they started being measured, which is actually quite low considering the number of people that think about and act on suicidal thoughts, but it's still just rigid and doesn't move. And that's what frustrates me, is that, we've seen huge investment into road safety. We've seen huge investment into cancer research and cancer treatment, rightly so, but we just have not done the same with suicide. And for something that is so, so horrible, so horrible, it strikes me as strange that we haven't done more. And I guess it's because it's very, very, very complex. But so is a lot of cancer. So part of my job now is to fly the flag for investment here and really just push as hard as I can to get this on the agenda and go, get into government and get into parliament and go, we need to make change here to stop this from happening to other children, or other people, because it's just, yeah. I mean, like you say, 9 people a day in Australia. I think it's around 20 a day in the UK or something. It's not good.
Yeah, and that's a really important point that you made about it's not just that horrible statistic. It's not just the person that we lose. It's all of the people around them that are impacted, and the likelihood of someone who has lost someone they love to suicide also taking their own life. It's increased by a huge amount. It's terrifying when you see those stats and really think about that those numbers are people, and it's happening far too often.
It definitely is, and the ripple effect is just huge. But then hopefully, my hope at least is that I can use a bit of that wave power, that ripple power, and just send it back to sender, return to sender, and go, we need improved education, we need improved access to support, we need better quality care, we need more investment in research, because people would be shocked to know how little of the actual treatment that's given to people for mental health conditions is actually not backed by research. So there's no, it's called empirically supported therapy. Very few of the treatment options are empirically supported. So research in mental health is just not there at all. So we need more access to that. We need better access to services. We need better community services. There's no good sending people to hospital, but actually really invest in holistic services. So it's debt support, it's career support, it's peer support, as well as treatment. It's, like I said, bringing the family into the treatment room. It's all these things. And someone needs to be in government going, well, this is important. So that's what I try and do now. And it's a job that I absolutely love, because you do see progress, and it's really slow, but you see the needle starting to move in the right direction, and it's good. It doesn't always feel like that, but at the moment it feels like that. This week it feels like that, which is good, and it does change.
You did
week by
get yourself
week.
in front of Boris, didn't you?
I did, yeah. Oh, that was a story. I went to a dinner, awards dinner in London in 2019, and I didn't think I'd won the award, and it was an open bar. It was at the Sun, and I was in Liverpool, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go with my Scouse mate from Liverpool, and we'll just have an open bar, and then we'll go out afterwards, right? Because I didn't think I'd won, and then we turned up. We started on the prosecco that was being handed around. Had quite a bit of that, and then went to go and sit down for dinner, and it was like nameplates, and it said Ben West, Paul Keenan was next to me, and then the Right Honourable Boris Johnson MP, the Prime Minister, right? So we're having dinner with the Prime Minister, and I was like, oh God, I am so pissed.
Perfect.
So then it was like, oh God. And yeah, he did. We had, he turned up, and then they got me on camera. I just remember putting it to him, yeah, on camera when we were doing an interview. Ended up winning the award and just getting this opportunity to go. I really think that we need better education for every teacher, trainee teacher around mental health, because in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same in Australia, although actually Australia is slightly better at this than we are, to become a teacher, you have to learn very little about mental health. In fact, actually, until this September, you don't have to learn anything about mental health. So I've always been very passionate about how to improve the access to that education for every teacher, not just some that are lucky to have a good education provider. So I put that to him, about 4 bottles of Prosecco in, and and he said yes, and ended up in Downing Street. And I've been working on that now for 7 years. And this September, we've changed the teacher training framework, the core content framework, that now includes, for the first time, mention of mental health. And it's a very, very small win, because it mentions mental health in such a small
Yeah, but
capacity.
it's there, and that's amazing. Like, you did that. That's so cool. We'll be right back after this quick ad break. The Lululemon Fast and Free running collection might just be the most comfortable running gear ever. From the moment I tried them, it felt like nothing. Seriously, the ultra lightweight fabric gives you that naked sensation but still holds you exactly where you need it. No pulling, no adjusting, no distractions, just me, the pavement, and a totally clear head. I've been getting back into some very slow running, and I'm so excited to feel that runner's high again. There's not much better feeling, and great running gear adds so much to it. If you're looking for running gear that you don't notice when you run, this is it. Check them out at lululemon.com.au. Now back to the show.
Yeah, I'd love to take all credit. I mean, there's a lot of people that work on these things, and you just sort of, in this world, you've just got to you've got to be there to push, and you've got to push as a group. But no, I've engaged as much as I can with Parliament, put together the research, and it's on there. It's now obviously our task to try and get that improved when they review it in 2027. But yeah, you've got to take these wins in this world, because government change takes 10 years. To change a law, 10 years is pretty standard time it takes to actually go from beginning of a campaign to successful law change. So you've got to be in it for the long run. And then, because it's such a long-term thing, you've got to find those little things to celebrate. And that was certainly one of them. So,
well, that was a gutsy move.
Yeah. I haven't had dinner with Boris Johnson since. People will may be pleased to know.
Well, I'm glad you did when you did. I do want to take you back a little. I mentioned before the fact that I think there is a common misconception, or the wording around suicide can be so negative, which I think reinforces that stigma when people say that it is a selfish act. Can you tell me about that, and how can we shift people's perception of that?
Yeah, I think you did ask this before, and I think I might have just ignored your questions. But no, you're so right. The language is really terrible, particularly around the selfishness. Oh, I find this so interesting. So when Sam died, I think the first emotion I felt was anger. Just how, because I was there, horrifically injured, right, mentally, from what had just gone on. I just, bombs gone off, all these post-traumatic symptoms I was experiencing, hallucinations, I was getting some horrible symptoms, just being injured massively by this. And it felt very difficult to not see it as he's inflicted this on me. And it was anger, it was real anger at how he could have done that. And that's normal. Like a lot of it's a very normal thing to have happen, even when people die from cancer and sort of more long-term things and go into hospice care. There can be a lot of anger around that grief. It's sort of quite a normal part of grieving, to be honest. It's sort of magnified a little bit when it's someone's choice. And for those listening on podcasts, I've done a really cringy thing of doing air quotes, but it's people talk about suicide as being a choice, but what's really important to know, there's two really important things to know about suicide. One is that it is, remember what I said before around cognitive constriction. So you get an idea of what you want to do, and your brain literally sort of your thinking becomes constricted around that goal. Suicide's not a rational decision. It's an irrational brain that is making irrational decisions. So we will never understand an irrational thought as rational brains. So you and I cannot sit here and understand how someone makes that decision with with rational thinking. It's an irrational thought. And the second thing that's really important is that cognitive constriction, and this idea that people look at suicide as a choice, but it is, if you can imagine that tunnel vision closing in, a tunnel isn't choice. A tunnel is an absence of choice, right? It's you don't get halfway into a tunnel and go, I'm going to take a left. You're stuck on that path. And so what I say to people when I talk to them that when they've very recently lost someone to suicide, I take them through that and I go, you cannot rationalize the irrational, and it's about cognitive constriction. It is the absence of choice which drives suicide, not a choice. And it's a very, very difficult concept to try and understand. But that person's brain has become constricted around that idea that that's the only way things will ever be good again. And I've spent a lot of time talking to people that have attempted suicide and survived. And that I find really interesting. Quite triggering sometimes, but very interesting. And unanimously, amongst everyone I've talked about that has attempted suicide and survived, they haven't thought about their family. They haven't thought about, getting one back on someone or how they were hurt, or, this isn't about revenge or anything like that. Everyone I've spoken to has been absolutely convinced that the world will be a better place with them dead. And that's a really difficult concept to try and understand. But they believe that they are holding people back, that they are, causing too much stress on the people around them, and that they'll never really tell you because they care about you, but this would be for the best. That's what they say. So actually, I was angry at Sam for putting that on me. He had the absence of choice. He was using an irrational brain to make a decision that he thought was actually in everyone's best interests. There were some other ways of thinking about this than going, it's selfish. And actually, there is a very strong argument for going that it's actually very selfless. But it's a very interesting, and I've done a lot of research on suicide and read a lot of papers and scientific papers on it. And from my point of view, it's a really important part of the healing. And all I can say from reading a huge amount of the research around suicide is that it is very, very, very difficult for a rational brain to understand, because you are just dealing with a very unwell brain. So yeah, but it's very normal, and that's why I say to people, it's very normal to be angry. It's very normal to hate them and be absolutely, raging about what they've done. But that passes, and then you can sort of see it for what it is.
I think that you answered that so well. I actually have experienced depression before, along with suicidal ideation, and I can relate to that feeling of thinking that that's probably the only option, because I felt like a burden, and I felt like doing the opposite and asking for help when I couldn't see it getting better anytime soon, that felt way harder. And I think that is why I like to talk, I feel like it's important to talk about this so much, because I think you can't rationalize it if you have never experienced it. But the closer you are to people who have, you do start to understand that it's not their personality. It's not the way that they want to think. It is a mental illness. And yeah, it's not going to make sense to a lot of people, but I'm so grateful for the way that you talk about this and how open you are, because I think you speak so eloquently and you explain it so well. And I think in a really digestible way, like a great way for people to be able to understand it better. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think also it's worth saying, because this is a question I get a lot, is that talking about this doesn't put ideas in people's heads. And I think it's an important point to make. So a lot of, when we talk about suicide prevention, a lot of the pushback sometimes is that talking about it is going to make people realize or think about suicide. And just in case anyone's thinking that now or listening to this about the conversation we're having, all the research shows that talking about suicide, as we've just done, prevents suicide and actually reduces the suicide rate and doesn't ever cause someone to harm themselves. And it's something that I'm really careful of, and I wouldn't talk about it if the research said the opposite. So there are people that will always say that to me when I talk about this. So it's worth just saying that, I've done the research. We talking about it is always a good thing. And the only thing we try and avoid talking about is means, because obviously access to the means is one of the biggest risk factors, is having access. So, but talking about it reduces it, and that's why it's important, Olivia, and that's why it's so nice to be here talking to you, and all the work you've done, sort of being an ambassador for these sorts of conversations and being such a great example of how you can have these conversations. I mean, what a great example that we've just given. You can have some really difficult conversations and it's been fun. And I hope it's been fun, at least anyway. Sort of, it doesn't have to be something that we put off.
I think you shine a light on the shame, and the shame can't grow. I think it makes it so much easier to talk about these things when it's more normalized, and it's not this like big scary topic that you can never touch on. I do want people to come away from this with some really tangible takeaways. So I would love for you to share. We talk about there's Are You Okay Day, and there are people having conversations around mental health, in quotation marks, to follow suit. I think that's great that people are saying, let's talk about it. But if you say to someone, are you okay? Or you seem like you're struggling, and they say, I'm not okay, I am struggling, I think people get scared, because it's like, where do you go from there? And I would love for you to help people with that.
Oh, that's a good question. So, this is such a good question. So let's say that's the example, right? I'm with someone, they've just told me that they are feeling suicidal. Or maybe not saying that, but sort of not, they're clearly not well. Like, I know a lot of people that will find out that someone they know has been diagnosed with depression or something. So it's very clear that something is going wrong. Very difficult to know what to do. I would say, before that you get to that point, know a little bit more, educate yourself on these things. So just now go and listen to podcasts about depression and what's available. And there's a really good website called the Hub of Hope. Go and familiarize yourself with that. If you're in the UK, I'm sure there is the equivalent in Australia. You're usually better at this than we are and first to it. But there are lots of these what are called directories for mental health support online. So it basically will give you the option to find out all the different services that are in your local area. And if you're in the UK, you can search for Hub of Hope. And I'm sure there'll be something in Australia if you search it. The other thing I would say is that if you are a friend with someone that's struggling, you don't, people get scared of having these conversations because they don't know how to solve those problems. I don't know how to deliver CBT or therapy. I have no idea how to do any of that. I don't know how to actually cure the depression. But what I can do is make sure that I show up as a friend more than I maybe would have done. And it doesn't mean that I have to go along with a white coat and go, have you been taking your meds? And all these like awful stereotypes that all of us think of mental health treatment being like. For someone that's going through depression, what I hear time and time again is what they really want from the people closest to them is for those people to just keep being the same. and to just show up as the friend. And I know so many people lose friends when they go through stuff like this because those friends just disengage. And it happens very, very commonly when something bad happens in life. Friends and sometimes even family drop off and don't communicate, and that friendship is lost because they are too scared to approach it. People don't want you to solve their problems. People don't want you to come with solutions. Actually, we know that that makes people feel less validated if you come and tell them what you think they should do. But people that are unwell and struggling, they need friends, and they need people to invite them to dinner, and they need people to invite them to plans. Even if they say no every time, just keep inviting. Because depression and mental illness is persistent, but the cure to that is by having persistent people around you that are just always going to consider you. So if you know someone, the first thing you need to do is just keep being who you are to that person, and don't change. Don't feel like you have to put on a white coat and start therapizing them. That's not your job. You're not trained to do that, so don't do that. The other thing I would say is, it's a hard one, but don't ever be afraid to ask someone if they're feeling suicidal. Again, it's not going to put thoughts in their head. It's a horrible, horrible, horrible question to ask someone, but there is never a bad answer. There is, if you ask that question, the only answer you're going to get is a good answer. Because if it's no, sound, we're all good then. Let's go out. If it's yes, you know where you stand. And I've asked that question at least 60 times now, and I've had a yes in about 50 of them because I work as a crisis volunteer. So, I'm dealing with people that are high risk. And I always go, I'd actually rather they say yes, because at least then we've got trust because they've told me about this. They know that I'm there to help, so they said yes, and then we can create a plan together. And that is how you stop suicide, is by being open and honest and having those conversations. But I'm not going to sit here like maybe some podcasts and say, you should just ask people more about whether they're feeling suicidal. What a horrible, horrible question to ask someone. Terrifying. And you'd probably put it off for weeks and weeks and weeks. But, if you're wrong and they aren't, it's quite funny, make a joke out of it. If you're right, yeah, what an amazing, amazing opportunity then for them to get some good support. So that's what I'd say is but to be honest, more important than asking, because again, I don't want to put loads of responsibility on people because it's not really your job. The most important thing is just don't lose friends over this stuff. No, don't be so nervous of talking to people about depression, anxiety, eating disorders, even serious mental illness, bipolar, psychosis, postpartum depression. Don't be so nervous of having these conversations that you lose friends, because that happens far too often, and that can be really difficult for the person that's difficult for both people, but particularly difficult for the person that's dealing with it. And I see that far, far too often, and I understand it because it's a horrible thing to talk about, but you're not there to be the therapist, you're there to be the friend. And I think that sometimes gets forgotten in all of this conversation.
That's really good advice. Thank you so much. Now, I always wrap up my episodes with a segment called Oranges and Lemons. And you share an orange of the day. Well, you're up very early, so you might not have one yet, but that is something positive. And it could be from the last few days. And then your lemon is something a little bit more sour or negative.
Okay. My orange. Well, this has been my orange.
Thank you. It's been an orange for me as well.
I forgot to put my alarm on for people that weren't. This was meant to happen. I was about 20 minutes late, and I remember waking up and looking at my phone, going, "Oh,
that's the worst feeling."
No. And then you go through that natural process of, what do I say?
I kind of like that you were just like, I have no excuse. I didn't set an alarm. I like your honesty. It was good.
Oh, it's awful. And I was like, oh, do I say that I'm ill? No, I really wanted to do this podcast, and we've tried to be organising this for ages. So I'm really glad that I did decide not to say that I was ill. And I'm here. And it's been so lovely talking to you, Olivia. That's really, really good. And I've enjoyed this a lot. My lemon was probably going to bed last night and not setting an alarm for this morning.
Oh, that's good. You've tied them together.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and to be honest with you, it's been a long week. A lot of difficult conversations this week. So I'm looking forward to a weekend now.
That's your seedling. Your seedling's something you're looking forward to. So the weekend can be that.
Yes, absolutely.
This has also been a real orange for me. As you've said, it's been a long time coming, I feel. And I'm excited to share this with the audience because I think it will resonate with a lot of people. I think it will help people to feel less shame if they are experiencing difficult mental health themselves, and also if they have a loved one who is struggling. So yeah, a big juicy orange talking to you. A lemon is that I'm very clumsy, so stuff like this happens to me all the time. But I walked into a door handle this morning and like cut my hip. So that's a bit of a lemon. And my seedling is, it is almost dinner time over here, and I am going to have dinner at a lovely friend's house, and they always cook the best food. So I don't know what's on the menu, but I know it's going to be good, and I'm really excited for that. Yeah. But it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Ben. And I would love for people to follow you on Instagram and read your book and just consume all the things if they want to hear more, because I think you're amazing. And I'm really excited to see, what the next 5-10 years brings for you, because the first few have been incredible to watch.
Oh, bless you. And thank you for all the support over the years as well. It really means a lot. It really, really does. I'm excited for the next 5 years. Hopefully there's more of these little wins.
Definitely.
It'll be good. But if not, I'll still be banging the drum.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to Tell Me More. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a review, share it with your friends, and follow or subscribe to the podcast. Your help in growing this community would mean so much to me.